Chapter 3: Counter-Economics, Our Means. Having detailed our past and statist present and glimpsed a credible view of a far better society, achievable with present understanding and technology, no change in human nature needed, we come to the critical part of the Manifesto. How do we get from here to there? The answer breaks into two pieces naturally, or perhaps unnaturally. Without a state, the differentiation into micro, the manipulation of an individual by himself in his environment, including the market, and the macro, the manipulation of collectives, would be, at best, an interesting statistical exercise with some small reference to marketing agencies. Even so, a person with a highly sophisticated decency may wish to understand the social consequences of his or her acts, even if they harm no other. With the state tainting every act and befouling our minds with unearned guilt, it becomes extremely important to understand the social consequences of our acts. For example, if we fail to pay a tax and get away with it, who is hurt? Us? The state? Innocents? Libertarian analysis shows us that the state is responsible for any damages to innocents it alleges the selfish tax evader has incurred, and the services the state provides us are illusory. But even so, there must be more than lonely resistance cleverly concealed or dropping out. If a political party or revolutionary army is inappropriate and self-defeating for libertarian goals, what collective action works? The answer is agorism. It is possible, practical, and even profitable to entrepreneur large collections of humanity from statist society to the agora. This is, in the deepest sense, true revolutionary activity, and will be covered in the next chapter. But to understand this macro answer, we must first outline the micro answer. The function of the pseudoscience of establishment economics, even more than making predictions like the imperial Roman augurers for the ruling class, is to mystify and confuse the ruled class as to where their wealth is going and how it is taken. An explanation of how people keep their wealth and property from the state is then counter-establishment economics, or just counter-economics for short. The actual practice of human actions that evade, avoid, and defy the state is counter-economic activity. But in the same sloppy way, economics refers to both the science and what it studies. Counter-economics will undoubtedly be used. Since this writing is counter-economic theory itself, what will be referred to as counter-economics is the practice. Mapping and describing all or even a significantly useful part of counter-economics will require at least a full volume itself. Just enough will be sketched here to provide understanding for the rest of the Manifesto. Going from an agorist society to a statist one should be uphill work, equivalent to a path of high negative entropy in physics. After all, once one is living in and understanding a well-run, free society, why would one wish to return to systematic coercion, plunder, and anxiety? Spreading ignorance and irrationality among the knowledgeable and rational is difficult. Mystifying that which is already clearly understood is nearly impossible. The agorist society should be fairly stable relative to decadence, though highly open to improvement. Let us run backwards in time, like running a film backwards, from the agorist society to the present statist society. What would we expect to see? Pockets of statism, mostly contiguous in territory since the state requires regional monopolies, would first appear. The remaining victims are becoming more and more aware of the wonderful free world around them and evaporating from these pockets. Large syndicates of market protection agencies are containing the state by defending those who have signed up for protection insurance. Most importantly, those outside the statist pockets or sub-societies are enjoying an agorist society, save for a higher cost of insurance premiums and some care as to where they travel. The agorists could coexist with statists at this point, maintaining an isolationist, quote-unquote, foreign policy, since the cost of invasion of statist subsocieties and liberation would be higher than immediate returns, unless the state launches an all-out last aggression. But there is no real reason to imagine the remaining victims will choose to remain oppressed when the libertarian alternative is so visible and accessible. The state's areas are like a supersaturated solution, ready to precipitate anarchy. Run backward another step and we find the situation reversed. We find larger sectors of society under statism and smaller ones living as agorically as possible. However, there is one visible difference. The agorists need not be territorially contiguous. They can live anywhere, though they will tend to associate with their fellow agorists not only for social reinforcement, but for ease and profitability of trade. It's always safer and more profitable to deal with more trustworthy customers and suppliers. The tendency is for greater association among more agorist individuals, and for dissociation with more statist elements. This tendency is not only theoretically strong, it already exists in embryonic practice today. Some easily defendable territories, perhaps in space, or islands in the ocean, or under the ocean, or big city ghettos, may be almost entirely agorist, where the state is impotent to crush them. But most agorists will live within statist-claimed areas. There will be a spectrum of the degree of agorism in most individuals, as there is today, with a few benefiting from the state being highly statist, a few fully conscious of the agorist alternative and competent as living free to the hilt, and the rest in the middle with varying degrees of confusion. Finally, we step back to where only a handful understand agorism, the vast majority perceiving illusory gains from the existence of the state, or unable to perceive an alternative, and the statists themselves, the government apparatus, and the class defined by receiving a new gain from the state's intervention in the market. This is a description of our present society. We are home.